I'm just gonna refrain from taking any questions from the floor. Your questions from the floor are inappropriate, and if I have to address you again, I will ask you to leave. Is Dianne Doucet available?
I am not in the habit of standing in great halls. I am not in the habit of being the loudest in any given room, but upon hearing that there would be an outlet for my words to be heard, I decided that my heart could stay silent no longer. For there is a disquiet in people's hearts. Something dark brews on our Canadian soil and elsewhere in the world. Here in our province, one of its forms takes shape in Bill 39. Although I speak to you today, the policymakers, my words are not only meant for you. They are also meant for the pharmaceutical cartel, the medical profession, and most of all, for the people. The people who have been manipulated and the people who have been denied a voice. My hope for today is that in some small way, I can be that voice. During these hearings, you have heard and will hear information that is contradictory to what has been allowed in mainstream news. Information that the media has warned you not to take seriously. Had our media practiced legitimate, balanced journalism, opposing views to Bill 39 would have been allowed equal and fair footing. But bias, propaganda, fear, and intimidation were instead used to manipulate the public into supporting this piece of legislation, while at the same time polarizing the issue, discouraging any criticism of its implementation, and ignoring its wider implications. From the media, one gets the impression that the bill is already a done deal. The reports have been one-sided in support of this bill and have dismissed the legitimate concerns of those who oppose it. They have attached the derogatory term anti-vaxxer to those who do not support mandatory vaccinations. They ignore, discredit, or try to destroy the careers of qualified professionals whose studies go against this pharmaceutical agenda. They also ignore a segment of the population as if they do not even exist. The people who stand for medical freedom and those who are pro-vaccination but also pro-medical choices. By doing so, they have created a divide between pro versus anti-vaccination groups, polarizing the narrative and discouraging the pro-medical freedom and pro-vaccine, pro-choice crowd from participating in this crucial debate. Mr. Carty has even incited hate and discrimination by publicly comparing healthy, unvaccinated children to loaded guns. This triggered some citizens to openly say online that they hope for the death of unvaccinated children and would like to see the ghettoization of the unvaccinated population. Haven't we heard that before in some form? If mandatory vaccinations for all age groups is the final goal, which I suspect it is most likely, is considering the simultaneous push for similar laws all over the world, then the government and taxpayer-funded media have done a spectacular job of introducing it in a manner that has minimized resistance. By introducing mandatory vaccinations to select groups at a time, people who are not directly affected at this time don't feel the need to stand up and speak out. To try to secure this agenda, a small, vulnerable group has been targeted for forced medical experimentation: our children. Why do I say forced if the government claims that families simply have to make the choice to homeschool? The choice isn't as simple as it is claimed to be. How can families homeschool if the decision to do so causes them to lose their homes? Mandatory vaccinations is also being forced on the adult population who have to decide between keeping their jobs, their homes, their ability to adequately provide and survive, and the so-called freedom to choose. People also fear losing their jobs if they speak against mandatory vaccinations. That is no choice at all. This move towards forced medical experimentation is spreading. From daycares to other workplaces, there will be fewer and fewer places in which the unvaccinated will be able to go freely. They are being pushed into a bottleneck until one day there is nowhere left to go. Make no mistake about Bill 39. We are not talking about quarantining individuals infected by a disease. We are talking about the segregation of healthy children from participating in society. Their crime is that their parents do not consent to handing over their bodies to the tyrannical will of a vaccine cartel, which is pretty much accountable to no one. When corporations, health agencies, and government institutions treat people like chattel and punish those who do not submit, you have slavery. If an institution can take it upon itself and do what it wants to people's bodies against their will, then you live in a slave system. I've heard from so many people saying how scared they are to speak up because of the toxic atmosphere that the media and this bill have created. They are genuinely scared and concerned. And no one should be scared of their government. That is why I am here today, to speak for those who are too frightened to speak for themselves. Some families fear they will have to flee the province if this bill passes. A long time ago in our history, Acadians were exiled from their homes by the Redcoats for political reasons. Today, some New Brunswick families are facing exile by coats of another color. The reasons and circumstances might be different, but the result is the same. Using the Webster Dictionary, I have chosen words which I believe encapsulate the very essence of Bill 39. Let us all ponder upon their meaning. Person, human, an individual, or a corporation. Infringe, to encroach upon in a way that violates the rights of another. Coercion, the act of coercing. Coercing, to restrain or dominate by force, to achieve compliance by force or threat. Restrain, to prevent from doing, to limit, restrict, or keep under control, to deprive of liberty. Segregation, the act or process of segregating. The separation or isolation of a group by enforced or voluntary residence in a restricted area, by barriers to social intercourse, by separate educational facilities, or by other discriminatory means. Segregated, set apart or separated from others of the same kind or group, restricted to members of one group by a policy of segregation. Violation, the act of violating, the state of being violated, infringement, an act of irreverence or desecration. Irreverence, an irreverent act. Irreverent, lacking proper respect. Arbitrary, ruling by absolute authority, government, marked by or resulting from the unrestrained and often tyrannical exercise of power. Despotic, characteristic of a despot. Slavery, submission to a dominating influence, the state of a person who is a chattel of another. Slave state, a nation subjected to totalitarian rule. Slave, a person held in servitude as the chattel of another. Chattel, property. Now here are two simple words that are critically lacking from the ideology surrounding Bill 39. Liberty, freedom from arbitrary or despotic control. Sovereignty, freedom from external control. We find ourselves here today wondering how we could find ourselves in this situation. Having given our power away, how we managed to slip this low. Well, there's a well-funded and organized power that has prepared the terrain in order for us to roll over silently, or in other cases, to beg in fear for our freedoms to be taken away. In order to bring about change that would be unpopular or that might face opposition under normal circumstances, a technique is sometimes used. It is called the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic is a process of bringing about change in a three-step process. The first step is to create or exploit a problem. The second step is to generate opposition to the problem through fear, panic, and hysteria. That is what the government and media have done exceptionally well in this instance. The third step is to offer the solution to the problem created or exploited by step one. A change which would have been impossible to impose upon the people without the proper psychological conditioning achieved in steps 1 and 2. By careful manipulation of media, they have successfully divided a population against itself in fear, turning neighbor against neighbor with the potential of having innocent children ripped out of schools, segregated from their peers to appease a fear that they, the media, have created. The nature of science is driven by questions, and as it stands, we are actively discouraged from questioning the vaccine agenda. Questioning things shouldn't be a privilege only allowed to those in white coats. As a cleric who asks his followers to have blind faith, the vaccine industrial complex, with its regulatory agencies and media, ask us to submit without question. They ignore true science, and instead they have opted for the practice of protecting the bottom line. Sadly, as it stands, science is controlled by profit. We are asked to believe that science is absolute, but science is not always right. Science disproves itself over and over again. That is the evolution of science. Science is an art form that changes with knowledge. How the vaccine industry and regulatory agencies treat vaccine science is the antithesis of that. The agencies that push mandatory vaccination have taken a dogmatic approach to vaccines, pushing their views and agendas while denying any evidence that contradicts its dogma. They push a specific view that is unable to evolve. That is anti-science masquerading as science. When it comes to vaccines, they claim the science is settled. How can true science ever be settled? There is ample scientific evidence out there that shows that the science of vaccines is anything but settled. But it is being ignored by those who have agendas, conflicts of interest, and actively pursue their own aims. Progress cannot be achieved when suppression of ideas exists. Until governments address the problems associated with the influence the pharmaceutical lobby has over our institutions, until we address the conflicts of interest present in our healthcare system, the problem of the breach of public trust will never be resolved. Remember that the will to be free of corporate rule is growing every day as we are faced with a tsunami of abuses that humanity as a whole has been subjected to in the name of profit and scientific advancement. The fight for medical freedom is at the forefront of that. The medical institution is one that can only survive on trust, compassion, and free will. Without it, it is not medical care, but a prison of scientific experimentation, and we as its dehumanized subjects. We are made to believe that abuses and mistakes are only a thing of the past, that they don't occur today. The Tuskegee experiments, that was a long time ago. The use of thalidomide in pregnant women, that was a long time ago. But in more recent times, the drug Vioxx was removed from the market due to its link to heart problems and the deaths associated with it. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about vaccines. It seems that whenever possible problems are associated with them, they do not get acknowledged and are swept under the rug. According to the vaccine cartel, they know everything there is to know about science. They could never be wrong. The policymakers look down upon the citizenry with arrogance. We live in a system that views the common people as being too ignorant to decide what's best for themselves and their children. If Bill 39 is passed, there are no safeguards against what type of vaccines will be put on the market and how many vaccines will be added to the schedule. There are no safeguards against what can be done to our bodies against our will under the guise of public safety. To the medical profession, I say this to you. Medical professionals who go along with the destruction of medical freedom only further erode public trust in the institution of their profession. If this bill passes, you will not be seen as caregivers, but increasingly you will be seen as the jackboots of the pharmaceutical industry. To the pharmaceutical industrial complex, I say this to you. You operate on fear. Media is your tool to frighten and intimidate people into submission. Censorship to squash any voice but your own. The tighter you squeeze, the more resistance you face. You have your own agenda, and it does not reflect the will of the people as much as you claim it does. For if it did, such a clampdown would not be required to achieve your own ends. The desire for freedom and truth is growing in humanity's heart. Ideas are mightier than the sword. All you have is the sword. To the lawmakers, I say this to you. The more you squeeze your people into a corner, the more we'll notice and question what is going on. There is a reason people are questioning the practice of vaccination. Trust has been broken. If people distrust the vaccine industry, it is because they have acted in ways deserving of that distrust. By not allowing balanced discussion in the public sphere, they have caused damage to themselves. You cannot restore trust with force. You can only further alienate the people with each tyrannical step. Bill 39 is the inevitable symptom of a sick system. And to cure it, we need to address the source of the sickness, not target those who refuse to be used and abused any longer. If trust is to be restored, then we must recognize the importance of shedding light on the very conflicted relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare system. You will not restore trust by punishing people who have every right to question the ethics of the system that controls them. You do not get to decide what does or does not happen to our bodies, like a slave master would do to the human beings under his or her dominion. Just because you sit in these halls and concoct ever more intrusive laws, it does not give you the right to own humanity. Your institutions cannot survive on chains. This movement toward medical freedom will not go away by force, censorship, division, or ridicule. It will only spread and get stronger. The pharmaceutical cartel who profit from disease knows this, and that is why the wheels of censorship and oppression are rolling full tilt. But this movement is an unstoppable force, and the short-term gains your political careers may get from voting this bill into existence are not worth the consequences of siding with oppression. It is a side that is destined to fail. Remember, we are the ones holding you up in the positions we have entrusted you with. Bill 39 is an attempt to be ruled and owned by corporations. You must not let that happen. If you do, you will have crossed a line that should never be crossed. Now I would like for all of us to step out of our roles for a moment and imagine we're just people, equals, because we all share this world as human beings under the system that is being created. Ever since 9/11, we have been asked to give up our liberties one by one in exchange for real or perceived security. It is a mantra that has been drilled into our collective mind for almost 2 decades. This mentality is what fuels ever more intrusive laws like Bill 39. If we are not careful, we will wake up one day to a Canada that is unrecognizable, where we have no freedoms left at all. We need to ask ourselves these serious questions. Who polices the vaccine industry? Who polices the policy makers? It is the natural order of things that parents raise their children, protect them from harm, and nurture them. This bill is an attempt by the government to step in and become a substitute parent. That is not the natural order of things, and this abuse of power is not indicative of a free society. Government seems to be mostly concerned with the health of people when it is profitable for a powerful industry. If it goes against their bottom line, they do not seem overly concerned. That's why issues like the potential health effects of GMOs, glyphosate, water fluoridation, the nuclear industry, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, smart meters, and the rolling out of 5G are mostly ignored. Think about it. The system does not serve us, and it's time for a change. More and more people are getting the courage to join in this unstoppable movement of individuals who strive for medical freedom of choice. Laws similar to Bill 39 will be stopped and eventually reversed all over the world, because the essence of being human is the ability for free will and the longing for freedom. I kindly ask that you take a step back from the media hysteria surrounding measles and look at the bigger picture of what is being created. If you let go of that fear programming, a whole new perspective comes into focus. We then can see the true face of Bill 39. We can do better than this. I hope you do the right thing. The ball is in your court. Mull it over, because big changes are coming. Thank you.
Questions?
How much time do we have?
That's a great question. We have 8 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for your very articulate presentation. And I tried to hear at the beginning who you were and if you introduced yourself, and I missed that somehow. So can I just ask first, just to clarify what role you... Like, I know you asked us to put our roles aside, but
yes.
Can I ask you to define your role and what you do?
I am a citizen. I am a person.
Yeah.
I am a mother. Mm-hmm. I am an artist. I am an intelligent woman.
Okay. All right.
I may not have the credentials that you require to take us seriously,
Yeah.
but we are people and we matter too.
Yeah.
Our voice matters. Mm-hmm. There are more people like me out there than there are people that hold positions of authority.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't asking it in a condescending way at all, but Thank you for that. I also would like to ask, you mentioned earlier that you're speaking on behalf of many who may be afraid to speak because they fear either discrimination or, at worst, loss of their career or impact on their career. Could I ask you to share a few examples of what you might know of?
People approach me because they know I'm vocal about it.
People such as? Just
I'm not going to mention
not
names.
The names, no, but
they're just people, even strangers, who know my stance will say, "Yeah, I agree with you, but we don't say anything because we're scared."
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll turn it over for others to have questions, and I do thank you for speaking out, and certainly every person has equal value to be heard, and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Fitch.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, just more or less a comment, but a reaffirmation that I guess as an MLA, I was feeling a little attacked, but that's okay. But of what I know of the people across the way and the people on this side, we are all here to try and make the society a better place. And that's why we're having this Law Amendments Committee. So everyone who wants to can either submit a report or come in and present. And I know it's very intimidating to, present in a forum such as this because you don't know us and I don't know some of our motivations. But again, I've been around for a long time as an MLA and a long time even knowing some of the folks again that may wear different colors. But we what I know of them is that we want to make sure that society is looked after and society is listened to, and that's why I appreciate you coming in here and sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, and really laying it on the line, regardless of, again, we don't need people with lots of initials after their names because, again, it's folks that come in and speak from the heart that, again, are what help drive this province forward and what molds some of the decisions that are made. So it's an important part of the process that you come in, and I know you mentioned a number of times of the stress that it causes, and I just want to say again, it's not easy, but I thank you for coming in here. And again, sometimes it may not appear to the public, but of the MLAs that I've known by and large, they're all motivated to, again, make New Brunswick a better place and a good place to live, grow, and raise a family.
I did not mean to offend anybody with my statements or attack anybody, but considering what we've seen in the media, this is the only side that's allowed to be spoken of, is the pro side. And that's all we read about. We're cornered. And so it's natural for us to come in to feel like the deck is already stacked against us, because the playing field has not been fair at all. To divide an issue as serious as this into black and white, pro versus anti, it polarizes it, and it squashes meaningful debate. And that's what happened. That's what makes Bill 39 so unfair, because there's so many people that could have participated in this that have just felt they had no place. They're like, I took my shots. I don't need to say anything.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for appearing here, and I want you to know personally from me, an MLA from Fredericton, New York, I value your presentation. I value what you had said, and I commend you for being here and being brave enough to speak up. And one part of your presentation kind of moved me a bit when you get into doing your explanation or definitions of the meanings of different words, and when you touched on slavery and segregation and this and that. Those are important issues, and we can't turn a blind eye to those sorts of feelings and emotions, and we just can't turn a blind eye to those sorts of things. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate you giving me the time and the opportunity to be heard.
Again, thank you very much for your time. I think it is unfortunate that that you do feel as though the deck is stacked against you. The purpose of law amendments is to provide meaningful debate. And, I've only been in this position for a very short period of time, but my experience has been that most bills, most motions, do not reach this level. And so the purpose is to be able to engage the public and all stakeholders. So I appreciate you being here today and everyone that has appeared. And just again, thank you very much for taking your time. And I believe Ms. Minton has a comment as well.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure whether to say anything or not. But I guess I just wanted to respond very briefly and say, I guess I would agree that obviously this has been quite divisive, and even looking at what the Chief Medical Officer for Canada has said is that even using language like mandatory is a divisive word. And to quote her, if you're trying to bring your community along to trust credible science, to trust public health, or to trust government, mandatory alienates people and could potentially backfire. And so I think that is an important thing that we should all keep in mind. I just want to raise an issue that was mentioned twice, and I just feel like looking at slavery, for example, I feel like it's inappropriate for us to compare this situation to slavery, and as a white person, I feel like I have to call out this line of thinking and shut that down. I don't feel like it's an appropriate comparison, but I do want to say I appreciate you taking the time and energy to be here today, and my quick question is just whereabouts do you come from?
I come from the region of Bathurst in the village of Nigadoo.
Okay.
And the reason why I brought up slavery is that if somebody can take the right to do something against their will to somebody else's body and they have no say about it, or else there's really bad consequences. Philosophically, it is the same. Just because it's not like what we see on TV or what has happened in our history, it is the same at the fundamental level.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Andy Clark.